Right now, somewhere in a laboratory, a scientist is staring at a DNA result that should be impossible. Not impossible like unusual. Impossible like it breaks the timeline of human history as we know it. That is not a dramatic statement. It is what is actually happening in 2025 and 2026 as genetic science advances so fast that the discoveries coming out of labs are rewriting textbooks faster than anyone can print them. Ghost ancestors, hidden inside your DNA for over 800,000 years. A centuries-old piece of sacred cloth containing the DNA of people from a continent nobody expected. Ancient viruses that were supposed to be dead but are actually running your body right now. A face finally put to a species of humans who lived beside us for hundreds of thousands of years and then vanished, whose genes millions of people still carry today without knowing it. DNA is not just the code of life. It turns out DNA is the code of history. Every secret, every migration, every mystery, every extinction, all of it is written somewhere inside a molecule so small you could fit thousands of them on the tip of a single strand of hair. And in the last 2 years, science has finally learned how to read it. These are the 10 most shocking, most world-changing, most jaw-dropping discoveries that DNA has revealed. Stay until the end, because number 1 will completely change how you think about yourself. Number 10, the secret code hidden inside your so-called junk DNA. For decades, scientists told us that 98% of our DNA was useless. They called it junk DNA. They said it was leftover biological garbage from millions of years of evolution. Dead code, broken sequences, evolutionary dead ends that were just taking up space in our genome. A trash heap inside our own cells. Now, in a series of bombshell studies, researchers have discovered that the junk was never junk at all. The so-called junk is actually some of the most powerful regulatory machinery in the entire human genome. An international team from Kyoto University, working with collaborators across China, Canada, and the United States, published a study in Science Advances, revealing that ancient viral DNA, sequences from viruses that infected our primate ancestors millions of years ago, is actively controlling which of your genes get turned on and off. These sequences are called transposable elements, sometimes called jumping genes, and they make up nearly half of everything in your genome. Half. Every second cell in your body is being regulated, in part, by ancient viruses that infected animals that were not even human yet. These virus sequences copied and pasted themselves throughout the genome over millions of years of primate evolution. Scientists thought they were random. They are not. Researchers found that specific families of these ancient viral sequences act like tiny genetic switches, flicking genes on and off, especially during early human development. They may even be part of what makes humans biologically different from other primates. The question science now needs to answer is this. If ancient viruses are running genetic switches inside every human body on the planet, what else is hiding in that 98%? The junk is not junk. The code inside the code is just beginning to be read. Number 9, 2 ghost ancestors hiding inside every human alive. Here's a question nobody has ever been able to answer before 2026. In July 2026, researchers at the University of California, Berkeley published one of the most unsettling papers in the history of genetics. Using a brand new technique they developed called TRACE, which reads genealogical relationships buried in the DNA of living people, they identified genetic regions that came from 2 completely unknown, unnamed human relatives. Not Neanderthals, not Denisovans. 2 different human species that science has never found a fossil for. The first ghost ancestor split off from the human family tree roughly 800,000 years ago, around the same time that Neanderthals and Denisovans diverged from each other. This population then interbred with early Homo sapiens in Africa more than 50,000 years ago, before the Great Migration out of Africa. And here's what makes this so extraordinary. This ghost DNA is not just in some people. It is in every modern human on the planet. You're carrying roughly 1% of DNA from a species that no scientist has ever identified, never seen a skull from, never held a bone of. They existed. They mated with your ancestors. They left their genetic mark inside you. And they left nothing else. No tools, no sites, no remains. The second ghost, even more ancient, diverged from other hominins about 1.8 million years ago. This ultra-ancient lineage appears to have interbred with Denisovans in Eurasia, and through the Denisovans, traces of it filtered into modern human populations in places like Papua New Guinea and Australia. 2 entire species of humans, gone, invisible, unknown to science, living on inside our DNA like passengers no one can see. Number 8, the Denisovans finally get a face. Imagine knowing that a group of humans lived beside your ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years, that they were smart enough to survive ice ages, that they crossed mountain ranges and ocean straits and spread from Siberia all the way to Southeast Asia, that they interbred with your ancestors and left DNA that millions of people carry in their bodies today. And then imagine knowing absolutely nothing about what they looked like. For 15 years, that was exactly the situation scientists were in. Scientists knew the Denisovans existed only because of a tiny finger bone found in a cave in Siberia in 2010. They extracted DNA from that bone and discovered an entirely new branch of humanity, one that had lived alongside Homo sapiens for hundreds of thousands of years, interbred with us, and vanished. Traces of Denisovan DNA still show up today in millions of people across Southeast Asia, Papua New Guinea, and Australia. But nobody knew what a Denisovan actually looked like. Then, in 2025, a skull changed everything. In 1933, a construction worker digging foundations in the city of Harbin in northeastern China discovered a massive ancient human skull. He hid it at the bottom of a well to protect it. It stayed hidden for 85 years. When it was finally retrieved and donated to science in 2018, researchers were stunned. The skull was enormous, with thick brow ridges, a flat face, a wide nose, no chin, and a brain volume larger than a modern human's. It was nicknamed Dragon Man. In June 2025, 2 landmark papers published simultaneously in Science and Cell confirmed what scientists had suspected. Dragon Man was a Denisovan. By extracting mitochondrial DNA from the calcified dental plaque on Dragon Man's teeth, the gunk that builds up over a lifetime and preserves genetic material like amber, researchers matched the genetic signature to the known Denisovan genome. For the first time in history, humanity could look at what one of its most mysterious relatives actually looked like. A face 146,000 years old. And from that face, scientists are now rebuilding everything. What Denisovans ate, how they adapted to cold, how they moved, where they spread. The mystery of 15 years finally has a face, and the face is enormous. Number 7, the woolly mammoth is coming back. Say that out loud. The woolly mammoth is coming back, not as a story, not as a movie, as a real living animal, genetically engineered from DNA frozen in Siberian permafrost for thousands of years and written back into living biological cells. This one sounds like science fiction, but it is not. In March 2025, the biotechnology company Colossal Biosciences announced a breakthrough that made headlines around the world. Using the ancient DNA extracted from woolly mammoth remains frozen in Siberian permafrost, some of them over 1 million years old, scientists identified the specific genes responsible for the mammoth's most distinctive cold weather traits. Then, in a proof-of-concept experiment, they modified 7 genes simultaneously in living laboratory mice, engineering animals that grew thick, curly, woolly coats, similar in texture and density to the mammoth's signature fur. These woolly mice, nicknamed Chip and Dale, were fully healthy and carried the genetic hallmarks of an animal that went extinct roughly 4,000 years ago. Colossal analyzed DNA from 59 woolly mammoth genomes ranging in age from 3,500 to over 1.2 million years old, building the most comprehensive picture of mammoth genetics ever assembled. The company's chief science officer confirmed that the target remains a living mammoth-like creature by 2027 or 2028, to be created by editing Asian elephant embryos, which share 99.6% of their DNA with woolly mammoths, and implanting them in surrogate mothers. The plan after that is to release herds of these cold-adapted creatures into Siberian wilderness preserves, where their behavior, trampling the ground and compressing the soil, could help stabilize the permafrost and lock in carbon. This is not a fantasy. It is funded by over $400 million in investment. The DNA of an extinct animal is being read, reprogrammed, and written back into life. Number 6. The Shroud of Turin hides DNA from the wrong continent. There are very few objects on Earth that have been studied more intensely, more obsessively, or more controversially than this one piece of cloth. And even after everything, the DNA just opened a brand new mystery. The Shroud of Turin is one of the most examined, most debated, most controversial historical artifacts in existence. It is a 14-foot linen cloth, bearing the faint negative image of a crucified man. Millions of people believe it is the burial shroud of Jesus of Nazareth. For centuries, the shroud has been housed in Europe, in France, then in Italy, in Turin, where it has been kept since 1578. In April 2026, researchers from the University of Padova published the first study using advanced next-generation metagenomic sequencing on official samples collected from the shroud in 1978. What they found completely changed the conversation. The genetic material on the cloth came from at least 14 different humans of distinct geographic origins. There was DNA consistent with the Middle East, which made sense given the shroud's documented history and its connection to early Christian communities in the Levant. There were microorganisms from salt-heavy environments resembling the Dead Sea. There was DNA from cultivated plants, domesticated animals, and even Mediterranean red coral, suggesting the cloth traveled extensively. But the most shocking finding was this. Approximately 38.7% of the human DNA on the shroud traced back to Indian lineages, bloodlines associated specifically with the Indian subcontinent. India, not France, not Italy, not Palestine. Nearly 40% of the human DNA fingerprints on this cloth come from a place nobody in the shroud's documented history ever mentioned. Researchers offered one explanation, that the linen fabric itself may have been manufactured in the Indus Valley region and imported to the Mediterranean by Roman traders. The ancient Greek word for the type of fine linen the shroud is made from, sindon, may even be etymologically linked to Sind, the region of modern-day Pakistan and northwest India famous for its textile production. The cloth has been handled, displayed, and traveled across the ancient world. Its DNA is the record of every hand that ever touched it. And 40% of those hands came from a continent that history forgot to mention. That is the mystery the new DNA evidence leaves completely open, and it may never be fully resolved. Number 5. Indigenous Americans carry the genes of an unknown Asian ghost population. The Americas were the last habitable landmass on Earth to be settled by humans. Scientists have long debated exactly when this happened and exactly how. Was it one migration or many? Was it across a land bridge or by boat along the coast? Did people come from Asia only, or were there other routes? For decades, the textbook answer was clean and simple. One migration, one land bridge, one founding population. The DNA is now saying that story was far too simple. In April 2026, a landmark study published in the journal Nature, the result of the Indigenous American Genomic Diversity Project, analyzed 199 genomes from indigenous peoples, spanning from the tip of Alaska to the bottom of Patagonia. It was the largest dataset of indigenous American genetics ever assembled. The study confirmed 3 distinct waves of migration into the Americas, including a previously unknown third wave that happened around 300 years ago. A migration from Mesoamerica, spreading south into South America and the Caribbean. This migration left a genetic footprint that scientists can now trace across continents, but then the study revealed something that nobody had fully expected. Certain South American indigenous populations carry, embedded in their DNA, a genetic signal with strong affinity to populations in Australasia, in Australia, New Guinea, and the Andaman Islands. This signal, which researchers named Ipiquera, meaning ancestor in the Tupi language of Brazil, has been present in these populations for more than 10,000 years, maintained at consistently low but measurable levels across generations. The ancient connection between South American indigenous people and people on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, separated by the world's largest ocean, is written into their genes. No fossil of this Ipiquera population has ever been found. Scientists describe them as a ghost lineage. They arrived in the Americas through an unknown route, mixed with the earliest inhabitants, and then disappeared from the archaeological record entirely, leaving only their DNA behind, still surviving in the genomes of people alive today in the Amazon rainforest. Number 4, the Aztec DNA discovery that rewrites their entire origin story. This one is personal for millions of people whose ancestors built one of the greatest civilizations in the pre-Columbian world. For a long time, the story told about the Aztecs was relatively simple. They were a migrant people who arrived in the Valley of Mexico relatively late, built a spectacular city called Tenochtitlan, and then were destroyed by Spanish conquest in 1521. Their own legend said they came from a mysterious northern homeland called Aztlan. Mainstream historians treated the Aztlan story as pure myth, but ancient DNA extracted from Aztec-era skeletons is now revealing something far more complex. The mitochondrial DNA, the genetic material passed exclusively through the female line, taken from ancient Aztec, remains matches directly to mitochondrial haplogroups found in modern indigenous populations across the Americas. The biological mothers of the Aztec Empire did not disappear with the Spanish conquest. They survived. Their daughters survived. And their genetic legacy is unbroken. Additionally, the 2026 Nature Genome Study found that genetic continuity in certain Mesoamerican populations extends back more than 9,000 years. The ancestors of the Aztecs were not newcomers to Mexico. They, or their direct biological predecessors, were in that region at the end of the last ice age. The mythology of Aztlan, the ancient homeland, the long migration, the chosen people, turns out to encode something real. Not a single founding city, but the biological memory of a population that had been rooted in their ancestral landscape for thousands of years before they ever became the empire that astonished the Spanish conquistadors who called Tenochtitlan more magnificent than any city in Europe. Number 3, a cosmic catastrophe 12,800 years ago. And the DNA proves people survived it. 2 separate scientific teams working independently in different parts of the world published papers in 2025 and 2026 that converged on the same terrifying moment in Earth's history. And the DNA from indigenous peoples is what proves that humans lived through it. In August 2025, a team of 25 scientists published a paper in a peer-reviewed journal confirming what they described as North America's first physically confirmed Younger Dryas boundary airburst crater, a massive circular depression near Perkins, Louisiana, dated precisely to 12 or 800 years ago. Inside the depression, they found shocked quartz, melted glass, and rare metallic spherules, the physical fingerprints of a cosmic object that detonated in the atmosphere, with a force equivalent to thousands of nuclear bombs simultaneously. This was not an isolated finding. In early 2026, a separate team, led by Dr. Christopher Moore from the University of South Carolina, pulled core samples from the floor of Baffin Bay near Greenland and found comet dust, microscopic particles rich in iridium, platinum, cobalt, and nickel, elements characteristic of extraterrestrial material, dated to the exact same moment in history. Both studies point to the same event, a disintegrating comet that pelted Earth with fragments 12,800 years ago, triggering a sudden catastrophic climate reversal that plunged global temperatures by roughly 50 degrees Fahrenheit and lasted over 1,000 years. The woolly mammoths went extinct. Early cultures across North America vanished from the archaeological record. And here is where the DNA becomes the most important part of the story. Because that same 2026 Nature Genome Study found that certain indigenous populations in the Americas maintained genetic continuity spanning more than 9,000 years, meaning that people survived whatever happened at 12,800 years ago. They did not disappear. They endured the darkness, the cold, the collapse, and they passed their genes forward through every generation that followed. DNA is the proof that the survivors of an ancient apocalypse are still here. Number 2, a super-archaic ancestor 1.8 million years old hiding in modern human DNA. 1.8 million years ago. Stop and think about what that number actually means. Anatomically modern humans, people who look like us, have only existed for about 300,000 years. Writing was invented around 5,000 years ago. The pyramids of Giza were built about 4,500 years ago. Agriculture is only about 10,000 years old. And yet, inside the DNA of living human beings in 2026, there are genetic fragments from a creature that walked the Earth 1.8 million years ago. This is not a metaphor. This is a scientific measurement. When the UC Berkeley team used their TRACE technique to map ghost ancestry in July 2026, they found not just one unknown lineage, but two. The second one was even older and stranger than the first. This so-called super-archaic ancestor diverged from other human relatives approximately 1.8 million years ago, at a time when our ancestors were still Homo erectus, still using basic stone tools, still hundreds of thousands of years away from becoming anything recognizable as modern humans. This super-archaic population somehow encountered the Denisovans in Eurasia, possibly over 200,000 years ago, and interbred with them. The Denisovans carried those ancient genes into later periods. Then, when modern humans eventually interbred with Denisovans on their way through Southeast Asia, traces of that 1.8 million year old lineage filtered into the modern human genome by an indirect route. Ancient genes traveling through one extinct species into another and then into us. In the populations of Oceania, where Denisovan DNA is most concentrated in modern people, scientists detected this super-archaic genetic signal sitting inside Denisovan-derived DNA, like a fossil within a fossil. A species that lived 1.8 million years ago left a thread of itself inside modern human beings alive today in Papua New Guinea and Australia. That species has no name, no skull, no bones. It is a ghost, 1.8 million years old, and it is inside us. Number 1, the biggest DNA secret of all: you are not who you think you are. Pull back from all 10 of these individual discoveries and look at what they are collectively saying. Look at the pattern they form when you put them all together. Because when you do that, something remarkable becomes visible, something that is bigger than any single discovery, bigger than any single paper, bigger than any single lab result. The totality of what DNA science is revealing right now in 2025 and 2026 is pointing toward a fundamental rethinking of what it means to be human and how long the human story actually is. Everything above, the ghost ancestors, the super-archaic DNA, the Piquera lineage, the ancient viral switches, the mammoth code being brought back to life, the ghost populations with no physical trace, all of it is pointing toward the same conclusion. The human story is exponentially more complex, more layered, and more ancient than the version we have been taught. We are not a single clean line of descent from Africa spreading outward in an orderly migration. We are a mosaic, a collision of populations, of interbreedings, of extinctions and survivals, of catastrophes and recoveries, of ghost species brushing up against our ancestors in dark moments of prehistory that left no record except in the molecules inside our own bodies. Every person alive today is carrying, right now, genetic echoes of encounters that happened hundreds of thousands and even millions of years before any human ever looked up at the stars and asked who they were. You have Neanderthal DNA, you have Denisovan DNA, you have ghost ancestry from a species that diverged 800,000 years ago. You may carry traces of a super archaic lineage 1.8 million years old, and nearly half of your genome is being regulated by sequences from ancient viruses that infected primate ancestors long before humans existed. You are not a single story. You are every story. You are the accumulated record of every encounter, every disaster, every migration, every extinction, every survival your ancestors ever experienced, written in a language of 4 letters, coiled inside every cell of your body, waiting to be read. DNA is not just biology. DNA is the most complete record of everything that has ever happened to life on this planet, and we are only just now learning how to read it. The more we look, the more impossible the story becomes. And the more impossible it becomes, the more extraordinary the reality of simply being human turns out to be. What was the discovery that shocked you the most? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more videos like this, subscribe right now because there is a lot more coming that will absolutely blow your mind. We are living in the most extraordinary moment in the history of science. Every single week, a new study comes out that takes something we thought was settled, something we taught in classrooms, something we printed in textbooks, and turns it completely upside down. The ghost ancestors from 800,000 years ago, the super archaic lineage from 1.8 million years ago, the indigenous American genomes carrying the DNA of a population that left no other physical trace, the Shroud of Turin with 40% Indian DNA on a cloth that was supposedly only ever in Europe, the ancient viruses running switches in your genome right now as you watch this, the woolly mammoth about to walk the earth again, the Denisovan face finally visible after 15 years of knowing only their genes, the crater in Louisiana dated to 12th date 100 years ago that might be the physical proof of an ancient catastrophe that reset human civilization. All of this is real. All of it is happening. All of it is rewriting history in real time. DNA is not just the language of biology. It turns out DNA is the most honest record humanity has ever had access to. And the story it is telling is stranger, older, richer, and more extraordinary than anything we ever imagined. Stay curious, stay subscribed, and never stop asking what the evidence actually says.